This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And, there's many of you out there who are listening to us either uh, listening and watching on YouTube or maybe on one of your favorite streaming platforms. Um, and some of you are probably wondering, like, where did this all come from? There once was a time that you got your entertainment from something called a radio, not a computer, and you watched TV. Maybe you had three or four stations you could watch, and that was it. Um, and you knew what the schedule was. But today, the digital world has just expanded, and you can listen to just about anything at any time. It's like it's floating in outer space. And today, my guest is Mick from the Doctor of Digital Podcasting. And Mick, when I first saw your information on Podmatch, it was like the Doctor of Digital. I love it because all of us need a little bit of a tune-up. And seeing you behind yourself in that car, I get the feeling that you can tune up a lot of things. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yes, you kind of gave us a little bit of the history, and I resemble those little bit of history too. So, yeah, very interested in podcasting, but it goes back to the old days of radio. And I was in college, I was in radio broadcasting. There were two different divisions in the college. There was a TV part and a radio part, and they
Right.
looked at me and they said, "You have a face for radio." So I went right into the radio. But I always was interested in radio and broadcasting anyway. I didn't really have any interest in being on screen or being part of the television business. So I really enjoyed it. It was really what got me through the first part of college because I was very interested in music. I love music. And the subtitle of podcast is also marketing tips with a musical twist because I can't get away from music, and especially the great era that I grew up in, and knowing the Beatles and Motown and Led Zeppelin and Mott the Hoople, my favorite band, and all those kinds of things. So since it's Cleveland, I do have to say my favorite songwriter of all time actually wrote Cleveland Rocks. And it's Ian Hunter. I've been following him for years and years, and I love his music. And he wrote this great song about Cleveland, and I love Cleveland too for the same reason that he always did, because you go to the coasts and they're the people who are supposed to be really cool and hip and what have you, and it's not. The real music fans are obviously in places like Cleveland, and that's why
Absolutely.
Cleveland rocks. And that's what got me through college. And so I've always been interested in broadcasting, especially in radio broadcasting. So as things have evolved and come around, I'm also a voice talent too. So I'll record audio books for people. So a lot of people will like a book or write a memoir and they need somebody to read it. So I really enjoy that too, because you're telling somebody's story and to get their story out to the world. So when podcasting started coming about, I'm like, oh, well, this is sort of like radio. It's sort of
Exactly.
same thing. So you get behind a mic and, you build an audience and you try to touch people with whatever it is that you're saying and doing and what have you. So I really embraced it because it reminded me of all the things that I really enjoyed about radio. And since I've done a number of different things, I've just come out with a novel. So I've just come out with my first novel. It's called Burning America. And I think everybody has got a story. So when it comes to podcasting and things like this, I say everybody, look, how hard is it to get a microphone? It's not that hard.
Exactly.
How many people have a voice? Raise your hand. Everybody's hands go up. It's like, well, why aren't you podcasting? So a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, I've said, to them, and this is something else I have. I have a podcast course to get people going because if you notice, not everybody wants to go to college or they don't get an immediate return on information. But I said, look, if you're a widget maker, right, you know how to manufacture widgets, you know how to get the materials for widgets, you know how to sell them, you know how to repair them, you know everything about the widget business. So why aren't you podcasting? Because everybody's expertise and story can get out there in various forms, whether that's an audio book or a podcasting. And that's what you're alluding to, is the fact that at
Right.
one time it was really confined. You had your three major channels. TV was ABC, NBC, that's it. I
Yep.
mean, but now everybody can be a publisher, everybody can be a podcaster, everybody can be an author. So get your voice out there, get your story out there. And I've saw this expression that it came across as that really makes a whole lot of sense, that your story may be the key to unlock someone else's prison. And I love that
Love
statement.
that.
You
Absolutely.
know, that's really a cool thing because you've got a story and you're a unique person. And that's what I would say. Like everybody's a unique creation of God, but you've got something to offer. But your story may be that key that somebody else needs to hear. So I highly encourage people to get into podcasting. That's what I did. Now, the other side of it was actually I was a standard liberal arts professor. That's where the doctor part comes in. So I've been in academia for a long time. So accustomed to publishing and teaching, but I think it also is something which lends itself to podcasting. So if you're a speaker and if you've been a writer and you've done other things, then you also should be podcasting because you've got knowledge and you have things that you can get out there. And I wanted to say real quick too, you mentioned the car because yeah, that's part of my branding. That's really cool. It's part of American Muscle. That was actually my parents' first new car, and my dad has gone on to his heavenly reward, but I keep it in his memory. That's a 1957 Buick Special
Oh,
46
wow.
R, and it's a great car. It's a two-tone green, and it's hard to see the both colors, but they have a red stripe on it. And I asked my mom, how much did you pay for that red stripe? It was $36 to get that measure.
Wow.
So
Interesting. Yeah.
it is. It's part of, it's America, it's American history, but it's also really important in terms of what I think is my branding and saying, I usually try to say, I'm the young guy with the old car. How's that?
I love that. Well, as I'm listening to your story, um, one of the things I love about doing this podcast is that usually within the first couple of minutes, all of us can pick out something in your story that we can say, "Hey, I relate to that." And,
Hmm.
ahead of time, I may have read your bio or I may have heard something else and I maybe didn't connect. But a couple of things I did connect to was when you went to college, you went into communications broadcasting.
Yeah.
Um, when I went to college, so did I, unbeknownst to my parents, because they told me I could go to college if I got my teaching certificate. And I had no desire to teach. For some reason, back in 1968, I saw myself being in a newsroom
Oh,
and sharing
okay.
the news. And so I took 2 years of broadcasting and I actually got my associates and I was going to continue for my bachelor's until my parents said, "No way, you just wasted our money."
Yeah.
They said, "Women are, I mean, look, Betty Friedan, she
Yes.
will show you a refrigerator, but
Hmm.
she's not sharing the news." And I just kept it in the back of my head the rest of my adult life. This is something I want to do.
Sure.
And when
Yeah.
my youngest was graduating high school and starting college, I said, "I'm going back to school. I'm going to get my bachelor's. I'm going to get my master's. And at some point, I'm going to do something with it." And all of a sudden, I started blogging, podcasting, and was like, this is who I have been meant to be. Now, you also mentioned that anybody out there who has something to say should podcast. And I
Sure.
agree. It's not about our followers, it's about reaching one person at a time.
Hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, there's so many of us out there. There's only a handful that are really going to get rich if all they're doing is podcasting. But at the end of the day, you can feel really good about yourself.
Yeah,
So,
no question. Like I'm not aspiring to be Joe Rogan. I mean, yeah, he's going to make a lot of money, and
right.
God bless him. But I think you're right. Like we all have our interests and our passions, and it's just like the internet in general. So I first jumped on in 1994, which is pretty early on the internet. I saw this is really new, and I was an educator at the time. But I said, well, why don't we just offer a lot of our materials online for our students? Because it's
Sure.
a lot easier. They can stay home. It's a better use of their time. It's efficient and what have you. Now, that was a new idea at that time, and there were no learning management systems. There were no LMSs. So essentially, I got a crew together and we were building an LMS. So before you got to 2000, when they first started coming about, we already had something in place. And then I said, well, once I've done that, like, well, I guess there's really no experts in distance learning. So I said, well, I guess I'm an expert in distance learning
Of
because
course. Yes.
I had done it. So I started consulting at that time, and I started my consulting business in 1998. And I thought, well, if I can continue this and this is my interest, well, why not? And obviously, the internet has grown. So I was part of a startup around 2000. I got out before the dot-com bubble burst. And the idea here is that as the internet has grown and the possibilities have grown, we too, as people, as individuals, can grow with it. So when I was going to go into broadcasting, going back to college days, the reason I didn't pursue it was because here I am about 19 or 20 years old, and they said, okay, you can get into broadcasting. I'm in Southern California, but what you have to do is go to Kansas and Oklahoma and what have you and work your way back.
Right.
Wait a minute, I'm
Yeah.
19 or 20 years old. I'm in Southern California. Are you kidding me? With all due respect to Kansas and Oklahoma, it's like, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm staying
Exactly.
here. And that's why I got more serious about the academic side. And that's really where I got into academia. And I said, okay, this is something where at least I can teach, I can get into what I would like to, and I still enjoyed history and what have you. So that's how I started. And I became just a stand-up regular professor in college, college dean, executive region director, and things like that. But point being is that whatever your expertise is, that's where it comes down with the name, saying the doctor of digital, in that I've got the academic background, but I also would claim I understand the digital world because this is the world that we're in. Everything is on the internet, everything is audio, everything is evolving too, and very quickly, but we as people can grow along with it.
And what you've shown us is that, you found a way to take your passion
Mm,
on the road with you, so to speak. You took it into the classroom. From the classroom, you said, hey, this can go even in a different direction. I don't need to be standing in front of these individuals. I can prepare something that these same students can, access on their own. I know when I went back and got my degree, I did mine all online. My husband also went back to get his master's. He did his in the classroom. And we realized we both had different learning styles.
sure.
Okay. In a classroom, you probably would have been so upset with me because I would fall asleep in a classroom. I don't care how interesting the subject matter was, but the fact that I had to learn it basically on my own,
Yeah.
off the internet,
Mhm.
you know, I would just, fill my body with more and more coffee, but I was getting excited. Look what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I can do this. So, you know, I really love the fact that you said, well, this is what I want to do, but I don't want to go here to do it. So I'll find my way around it. And that's what Avoid the Maze is about. It's like
Mm,
we don't have to get stuck doing something that we don't want to do. There's always room for something that we enjoy.
sure. This is, like I said, this is not a rehearsal, right? This is
Right,
life.
right.
So, you only go through it once. So whatever you want to do, follow your passion. So there's a historian of religion, Joseph Campbell, who says, follow your bliss. It's short, it's simple, but exactly right. If you want to lead a fulfilling life, follow your bliss. What makes you happy? And things will come along. We had mentioned earlier about not necessarily looking for the big crowd. So yes, it's great if people listen to my podcast. I love them. Come on in, listen, benefit from it. But I'm not necessarily looking for the audience. I'm looking for those people who I'm supposed to come across. And I'm getting my part out there, which is I'm just putting the message out there. Whoever is going to respond because like attracts like. You're going to attract the right people who should be listening
Exactly.
to you.
Exactly. And it's interesting. I have an IT background, and so on the weekends, I represent um, information technology at a big box store where I'm helping their employees know how to sell better, know what is inside the product rather than just off the top of their head saying something that possibly is not true, which a lot of them have done.
Mm,
Um, and I'm finding that that is my so-called podcasting platform on the weekend, even
yeah.
though I'm not doing it on the internet. I'm doing it one on one. And so there are so many ways that we can do the things that we love. Sometimes we just have to be creative about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you said about adult learning, I mean, see, that really was one of my passions. I spoke in a lot of and taught in a lot of programs that were adult learners, and I really loved that crowd. Taught on weekends, so I thought, here are people who are working 9 to 5, and they would take a weekend college program in order to finish their bachelor's degree. And I thought, yeah, I mean, these are the people I want to work with and introduce them to this whole range of great things that are out there. I mean, the humanities and the liberal arts that they may not have known or not well
Right.
before, but can appreciate. So one of the best things I heard pretty consistently throughout my career was there were a lot of people, they said, kind of got into your class kicking and screaming and I didn't want to take it, but now I'm really glad that I did because I learned a lot. That really meant a lot because I tried to make it as interesting as possible and also use a lot of medium. So a lot of YouTube clips and a lot of interactivity because in an adult program, I was teaching 4.5 hours a night. So
Wow.
that's
Yeah,
a
that's a
long,
yeah.
long time. So that meant a person who had been working all day, but they put in their 8 hour shift and then they're taking a class at night. So, I mean, kudos to them, the fact that they would get done and get finished and pursue a career. So there's a lot of dedication. So, I mean, I wanted to honor and respect them to say, look, I'm going to do the best that I can and introduce you to these materials. And I think it's going to benefit you. It'll make your life better. And that's what I consistently heard from my students. So it's very rewarding to hear that.
And it's interesting because when I first went to college, nobody even attempted to ask me what my learning style was, although I'm not sure I would have really known what it was. But I
Sure.
didn't know there was anything more than sitting in the classroom, trying to absorb as much as you could, and I'm not good at memorizing. And so it'd be like I'd get stuck on one thing that the professor would say, and I missed everything else. So now came exam time. And if that one thing wasn't on the exam, I was in trouble. Uh, and so again, it wasn't until I went back to school that I understood what my learning style was. I needed to be involved
Yeah.
in every piece of the work.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it makes no sense to me. And in the 90s, I did some training on software packages. And, you know, I got everybody involved. I would ask each person, why are you taking the course? How are you going to use it at work? How are you going
Sure.
to use it at home? And if it was somebody who was just at home and wanted to write letters to all their friends, I focus on you just write letters.
Hmm.
Because once you become comfortable with that, you're going to want to know something else. Okay. But if I teach you how to put together a resume and you have no intention of using it, you're not going to remember. That's not going to be interesting to you. Um, and so I started taking what I needed and adapting it in my classrooms. Now, it's not always easy, as you know, if you have a room full of students to do all that.
Yeah, and there are different ways of learning. So when I learned something, I've always been a voracious reader. So when I was a kid, I'd read a lot, and then I still have a lot of books. I have like over 4,000 books. But I realize in teaching, not everybody wants to just sit with a book and read.
Right.
So there are auditory learners, people who need to listen, and there are also kinesthetic learners. You have to move, and so that involvement and participation, but knowing the different styles that are out there are really help to address what the students really need. And once you find that, and if you're presenting material, you have that combination of several different things so that one way or another, they are going to get it, whether it's participating or they're
Right.
listening or they're reading. And the senses of the body also help us because if you're hearing, seeing, and participating and moving, all of those things are going to help you learn. So that's what's really important about understanding how people learn, and especially adults too, because once you get out of school for a while, it's like, well, how long has it been since you've sat down and done something like this? It's been a while.
Well, I wish all that would have helped me when I took biology because I had to use all my senses in that class, and I absolutely hated it. And I was closing my eyes when I had to dissect my frog. So, um, you know, even though I'm a hands-on learner, that was one class I did not want to be a hands-on learner.
Sure. Sure.
So you've been doing this obviously for quite a while. Um, do you have any vision of how this is going to change in the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I think I'm going into my prediction is, and some of this I talk about on my podcast. I say the internet to me is all going to be audio because if you think about how people communicate, what's the easiest, the closest you can get to what we do normally and as a human being is the way that we're going to move into technology. So, in other words, if you would have your choice, would you rather type something or speak? Well, it's more natural to speak. So since I do digital marketing as well, too, marketing terms of audio. So instead of typing into Google and saying, find me the closest Mexican restaurant and the best one in this area. Well, you get your phone and you say, what's the closest and best Mexican restaurant in this area? That's what I'm looking for. Well, an audio ad pops up and they go, well, Ponchos, go down the street, turn left, and there you are. So, I mean, things like that, I think, could be the way that things are moving in terms of the internet, because the internet is a very dynamic place and it's changeable. The algorithms change all the time. But I think the closer it gets to the way that we interact usually and normally as human beings is the way the internet is going to go. So I think a lot of the services, whether it's podcasting, Twitter is moving into an audio type environment, LinkedIn tries it. And so I think what people are realizing is that things are going to move in an audio direction. So that in terms of marketing and in terms of the social media, it's there. So I put a little bit different slant on the phrase in my podcast, not necessarily social media, but closely related. It's social audio. And by social audio, I mean all of your social devices and apps moving into an audio type environment. And podcasting, I think, is at the head of it because it's pushed a lot of the social media
Right.
companies, the internet, in this direction. So going back to the pandemic, for example, people feel very isolated and what have you. There were the trends moving towards audio and podcasting at the time, but it accelerated obviously
Right.
because people still wanted that human connection. And they say, I feel very distant, I'm isolated, I'm quarantined, I'm on lockdown, but how do I reach out and connect with people? And I think podcasting is a great way. So years ago, God rest his soul, my dad's gone. When I first introduced the internet to him, I would say, like, he was trying to say, well, what's the internet? And I go, well, Dad, I mean, think about anything you're interested in. It really doesn't matter, like anything,
Right.
because I will guarantee you somebody somewhere shares that interest, and that's what you find on the internet. So it opens up a whole range of things that are now connecting you to other people that are not necessarily down the street, but somewhere else. So if I'm thinking in terms of music, and I've already mentioned my favorite songwriter, Ian Hunter, but he's his career sort of lagged in the 1980s and you never heard about him. Now, he was well known in the late 60s and the 70s with Mott the Hoople, 1980s, hardly heard from him. But in the 90s, as the internet came around, you started realizing, oh, wait a minute, there's a fan base out there that still wants to hear him. So he started performing in England, and late 90s, his career started to take off again, then in the 2000s, and then here he is. He's 83 years old. He's still rocking. He's new albums coming out in November. So I mean, God bless him. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, there's my aspiration, to try to take the technology that's around and has been around, but use it in a way that you have found your passion in. And people like that I really admire because yes, our passions are matching up with the technology that is now available and the people that are also interested in the very same things that you are. It's just that we're widely dispersed and it's worldwide. So it's brought the world together in a lot of ways.
Well, and it's interesting because my father passed away in 2004, but right around 1990, 1991, my brother gave my father his old Mac. And he said, Dad, this is really easy to use. I'm going to show you how to use it. And at the time, my dad was probably in his 70s, thereabout. And my dad picked up on it fairly quickly because he knew he had a whole world out there.
Yeah.
And he knew that when he had a heart condition, and there were times that he was like, just couldn't leave the house. And this was like his way. and
Mm,
he was a prolific writer. So he
right.
would write things and then email them to all of his friends. And then they would send them on, and all of a sudden he'd get something from somebody saying, Harmon, this is really great. Can we use it, at an event we're having? And it just changed his world.
Sure.
My
Awesome.
mother never really cared so much about the computer, but she loved using FaceTime. And that way she got to see her grandkids who
Sure.
lived out on the West Coast. So now comes the pandemic. And, you know, I thought everybody was using FaceTime and Zoom and Teams. I figured, who isn't? But yet I found out so many of my very literate friends were not. They
Mm,
just they said no, they'd rather do things in person, but now that they couldn't, I started introducing them to, we're just going to have a phone conversation. We're going to do it on Zoom today. So
mhm.
click on this link and it will feel like we're sitting in the same room. And then I started reading how people were having dinner parties via Zoom. I never got into that, but um, there is so much in technology that is, can take us miles and miles and can provide us with so much education. And, as long as we're breathing, it's okay to get educated.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great line since I love music. I say it's in every conversation I have, but great line from Bob Dylan. He who isn't busy being born is busy dying. That's a great line, absolutely, because it's like I said earlier, it's not a rehearsal. This is it. But I mean, the fact that you can still learn and pick up things, and it's pretty simple, pretty basic, that if you are moving, you're alive. And if you stop, you're not. So that's also true about their mind and about our physical bodies and anything else that we have, that we can continually learn and grow and fulfill the things that we really are making us happy and make us more human and fulfilling human life.
Absolutely. And retirement is not necessarily sitting on the bank of a river fishing every single day. If you like to fish, that's one thing, but even every day is a little boring. So there are so many other things that we can do as we get older. Um, and I'll tell you, watching my father learn how to use the computer
That's awesome.
and be as proficient. Now, I will tell you, he would drive us crazy some days and he'd say, I need you to tell me in points 1, 2, 3, and 4 how to do something. But once he did it, he was fine. And
Yeah.
so that was his learning style. So tell us a little bit more about your podcast. How often do you do your podcast and where can we find them?
Yep. It's fairly simple. I try to do about at least one a week, but it has ranged. So now I've got like well over 400 episodes. So things have changed over time. There were some days where I was doing three a day, and there was a little bit more of a lag, but roughly it's one a week. And what I do is I'm looking for interesting people, CEOs, business leaders, people that have some organization I think would help other people. So the way I think of it, and my mission statement is to have CEOs or business leaders who are interested in growing their business with social audio. And I think that's the focus, because when I'm finding people who have interesting companies, they've answered or solved some problem that a lot of folks are looking for. And at the same time, they want to grow their own business as well, too. So for a lot of people, I say if they're new to podcasting and have never done it before, here you have an audience. Here you can come on my show. There's no money exchanged. It's just, look, one hand helps the other.
Right.
I get somebody on my podcast, so I appreciate it. You get your voice out there, so you benefit. It's a win-win situation. So it's on all podcasting, major podcasting services. It's virtually everywhere. It's worldwide. The biggest one in India. I get quite a few people listening in India. I use Spreaker as my basic
Right.
vehicle, but I also am on YouTube as well, and it's all the social media ones, all the big places and the ones that you would find. It's easy enough to find, and just Doctor Digital, and you'll find me.
Well, we're going to put all that in the show notes. So for
Good.
those of you listening, if you said, wait a second, where did he say to go? There will be a link because I believe in making things easy for people. Um, I like when people make it easy for me. I know everybody says that they love Google. I'm one of those people that hates Google because I never put it in correctly. And then I
Mhm.
get something that I didn't even want. And I've been doing the voice commands, and Google doesn't like my voice. I will tell you that. So, but I'm going to have to get better at it. I don't know exactly what I need to do, but I will keep trying. And I'm so glad that we got to meet you because um, you you complement what we are trying to achieve at Avoid the Maze. And that is, we all have a voice. We all should be allowed to use it.
Yeah,
Uh, we don't have to agree with each other. But
sure.
sometimes when we share in conversation, we learn something. And it's
Mhm.
like, I didn't think of it in that manner. Or could walk away and say, hey, I still disagree, but you can still be friends.
Absolutely.
So agreeing has nothing to do with friendship.
Yes. I believe in civil discourse. I love my country and I love the fact that we're all Americans and that's it. I don't necessarily need to agree with people because we're in a contentious age, obviously. But, people have their own perspective and, it's just easy going, right? You respect me, I
Absolutely.
respect you, to each their own, I say.
I love it. But I have one last question. I'm
Sure.
watching looking at your suit jacket. Explain your suit jacket.
Well, it's just something I care for. So I'm also in California too, so it's extraordinary casual. So I think of it this way. I rebel in a little bit of a more respectable way, if that makes sense. So because everybody is very casual, I'm doing just the opposite. So I'm a little bit more formal than everybody else. And that's what it comes down to. And I actually like the style there. So a military style, or if you know some 19th century American jackets, or if you remember great old musician, again, of
Right.
music, Johnny Cash,
Oh, yes.
long
Yes.
suits, things like that. So it's just a style that I care for. So I thought, well, why not? I mean, I like it, so I'm going to
I l-
wear them.
I love it. And I just keep looking at the lapels, and it's like, God, that is really neat. I don't remember the last time my husband wore a suit jacket. So,
So I'm rebelling, but that's what it is. I'm
okay,
rebelling a little bit, but just to stand out. And I think, like everybody, it's a differentiator, right? So everybody has got their own individual sense of things, and we are individual. So that's what it is. I'm a little different. I'll
I
put it.
love it. Well, different or not, we certainly enjoyed having you on today. Enjoy the California weather. We have some
Will
of it
do.
here
Yes.
in Cleveland today. So uh, I'm going to try to get out and enjoy it myself. Have a good day.
Good deal. Thank you
Bye.
too. Just remember, Cleveland rocks. We love it.
We do.
It's a
Bye bye
great
now.
city.
Thanks.